Okay, so here's a big question. How do you make a character interesting? This question is a question I've honestly been dreading answering. However, I know exactly how I want to talk about it. I'm going to break it up into 3 sections based on the 3 character traits that I talked about back in Inktober Day 2, link appearing right now. So make sure you understand these 3 keys before you move on. So there's utility, motivation, and personality. And I'm going to give you 5 tips for each aspect in regards to making an interesting character. Aspect number 1 is utility. 5 tips for utility. Number 1, make sure your character has a utility. Most obviously, but most forgettably, make sure your character has a purpose. It's one of the simplest ways to bring some needed life to a character. If a character has a purpose in a story, you have a reason to invest time into them, and thus interest is created. However, number 2, double up utilities instead of spreading out tasks. Sometimes the use of your character is incredibly limited. Maybe you use them exclusively to tell a bit of exposition, and then you move on and you have no more purpose for them in the story. Instead of leaving characters to do one thing and then move on, double up things, combine characters, allow them to take up multiple roles in the story, so you can give readers more time to get to know them. Sometimes all a character needs to be more interesting is just more time to shine and be themselves and around your readers, and that's all that you need. However, number 3, break up utilities to create conflict. This is the opposite of the last advice, just to make things confusing, but sometimes a character might have too much to do, and you need to make them more of a focused character by giving their tasks to someone else. The bonus of this is by dividing up tasks, you can drive conflict. Now the characters have to rely on someone else to get things done. At the same time, this can put more focus on the main role of a now less burdened character. Concisely put, confusion of goals is a barrier to interest, which leads me to my 4th tip, which is emphasize a character's utility. Make sure to emphasize the use of a character, especially if this is in relation to a larger task or goal. Make sure your readers understand what your character is for and what is being accomplished. Not only does this make the story clearer, but once again, it allows the reader to be closer with the character. And the closeness is sometimes what you need a lot more than bells and whistles that make your character seem more interesting to you. Sometimes interest is just born of hanging out with someone. So that leaves me to my final tip about utility, which is avoid redundancies. Avoid making a bunch of characters that all serve the same exact purpose to your story. And I don't mean characters can't all be after the same thing. No, I mean, if 3 characters all want to climb up this mountain, they each serve a different role in the story when it comes to that. So like one character gets to the top, one character falls off early on, and one nearly makes it to the top before like failing right before the one who does get to the top is able to reach it, and it's all bittersweet and whatever. Like, you have to be aware when 2 characters amount to the exact same use. It's sometimes tricky to tell, but it's definitely something you want to pay attention to. What ends up happening if you have 2 characters that have the same use is that they will bring each other down to the same level. If one character's arc is incredibly amazing and the other one's a little lackluster, because they did the same thing, you're going to undercut what was so amazing about your first character by having kind of a lackluster other character do the exact same thing. You don't want 2 characters competing for the same role, and you're better off combining them or changing something fundamental about the character that is redundant. Okay, so all of that leads me with aspect number 2, motivation. So number 1, give your characters competing motivations. A great way to add interest is to make characters at odds with each other. And just a reminder, our definition of motivation is why a character acts. This means that competing motivations means several different things. For one, it means that characters can compete for the same goal. Another interpretation of competing motivations is that the reasons characters act come from opposite foundations, opposing values. The contrast between your characters is one of the most important aspects of making them interesting. This is going to get stressed a million times in all these points. I hope you are ready for it. Okay, number 2, brainstorm out multiple backstories and motivations for your characters instead of relying on your defaults. Take time to spitball ideas. Your first thoughts are often your most boring. They're your dominant strategy, you know? And even if, in the end, after trying all these ideas, you end up going back to your very first one, it's worth going down those roads and testing them out before making a decision. Mind maps are really great for this because they allow you to explore multiple ideas in depth and quite thoroughly. Explore, spitball. You can really create a diversity in your cast through looking into motivations and making them different. Okay, number 3, choose backstories that inform flaws. This is an important element. I'm just going to say everything's important because it all is, but flaws are pretty important to remember. Flaws are interesting. That is a given. But even more than flaws, where they come from provides a lot of depth. Why one person has difficulty making friends is very different than the reason someone else has difficulty making friends, you know? It doesn't have to be super tragic. It doesn't have to be like heart-wrenching, a gut punch story, but allow your character flaws to develop naturally through motivation. Make sure that your character develops the flaws through their backstory and through their goals or through the things that they value. It's always a good thing to keep in mind when you are working on creating your motivations. Okay, number 4, diversify your backstories. This aligns with all the advice. Again, it's gonna get repeated, but again, get out of your defaults. Even people with similar situations who have ended up in similar places in life have had different roads getting there. And knowing the different roads informs a lot about a character, and these differences are great for creating somebody that is interesting. Allowing for diversity in this element really widens the amount of variety you can get from your characters, even in just a single cast. Often changing a single variable is enough to change a lot about someone's life. Okay. Number 5, explore theme through motivations. Finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this, but look for similarities in character themes. If you notice that all your characters are interacting with the same theme in the exact same way, it might be time to take a deeper look into it. See if you can expand and state your theme in a different way. Often this can result in a new, refreshing character that allows you to challenge your own perspectives, and that is incredibly valuable when you want to create interest. Okay, that all leads us into aspect number 3, the final aspect of personality. So, number 1, browse archetypes, tropes, references. Basically, steal a personality. Inevitably, your motivations and utility are going to change your character into its very own thing, and your interpretation is going to change it into its very own thing. Don't be shy to just copy a personality wholesale from your favorite trope, archetype, character, person, anyone. If you find a personality inherently interesting, just take it because it's interesting already and you just get to build off of it. By the time you get a character out of this, it's not going to be the same one if you do your legwork in the other elements. Don't worry, okay? Number 2, write a POV room description. This is one of my favorite writing exercises, but basically you sit in a room and you write about the room from your character's perspective. What do they notice about the room that you neglect? How do they describe things? Like, what kind of vocabulary sticks out to them? What senses stick out to them? This always helps me step out of myself and really helps me embody a character. And thinking outside of your perspective can really add life to a personality. It's really the key to developing a personality. Number 3, same kind of thing. do personality tests in character. I mentioned this in my character sheets video, but I frequently do personality quizzes online as my characters. This introspection is another moment where I can really force myself into a different mindset. Make sure to push the answers further than your comfort zone. Like if you look at an answer and you're like, I would never choose that. Who would ever think like that? That is an interesting character that you might want to pursue and delve into. Why would someone ever hold a belief this way? That's the joy of personality tests. And leaving your comfort zone is just a wonderful way to create an interesting character. Number 4, avoid too much repetition in the cast. Like with all elements, don't make too many repeats of the same archetypes. Interesting characters are relative. It doesn't matter how many interesting outside of the box characters you make, if inside of their story they are surrounded by a cast of people that acts the exact same way as them. Sometimes it's fun to have some characters that kind of act the same, especially like with villains and heroes, where they act the same way while holding like wildly different values. But too much can be a major problem. Okay, you want interest, but it's relative. And number 5, create something consistent. Make a personality that makes sense and reacts consistently, even if the consistency is that it is always inconsistent. Mood can change a character, and that's fine, and characters grow, but you have to stay in character. You have to hold on to that spark that makes your character interesting. It's very hard to do that, but always keep it in mind. Finally, most importantly, all the aspects aside, my bonus advice, secret tip 16, I mean, it's in the title, is mesh the aspects together. Rounding out your character is the best thing you can ever do for them. Paying attention to all 3 aspects and making them all interconnect and intertwine in the end is what's going to make you have the most interesting, unique character that you need for your story. And all the other stuff is kind of secondary to creating a round character that is consistent within themselves. That is all my advice on creating character personalities. Very long, and we're not even done because now I get to talk about my character. If you have any questions about anything I just said, don't be scared to ask. But I think it's time for me to ramble. Otherwise, this video is going to be 500 hours long. Okay, so this character being drawn here is Amos. And he is from the What If My Boyfriend Was a Dog RP. I already did a video explaining the boyfriend dog. I'll link to that right now so that you can go to that and get all the details. But basically, this is a world where like wizards exist, and wizards have ungodly amounts of power. So, Amos, let's start from the beginning. When Amos was little, he was growing up in Scotland, I believe. I don't know much about the Europes, so I'm sure I did a terrible job here. But either way, he was growing up there, and when he was a little kid, he was going to school, and one day, a wizard shows up at his school, and she just walks into the classroom of, like, basically, like, kindergarten kids, and this wizard's name is Chaos, and she's awful. She's an awful human being, and she looks over all of the kids, much to the teacher's dismay, but what are you gonna do? She's a frickin' wizard. And she selects some kids that she's gonna just take, and Amos is like, wait, don't be mean. And she's like, oh, I guess I'll take you too, even though you're basically a useless kid, and I see your grades and you're not gonna amount to anything, but I suppose I'll take you too because I don't like to be sassed. And that's Chaos. She doesn't like to be sassed, and she doesn't play fair. So she takes Amos to live in her big-ass manor, where she basically Chaos's prerogative is that she takes kids and she raises them to complete labyrinths. And as I mentioned in the first RP thing. The labyrinths form when Ghost loses its object, and then you have to get the object, and once you complete the labyrinth, you become a wizard yourself. And she wants to basically raise little wizards to complete labyrinths for her, and then kind of serve her is her game. She's not a nice person. And so Amos grows up. He stays with her for a little bit before so there's this one big labyrinth that she really wants to close. Like, her goal is, she's like anti-hero, but really terrible. She wants to close this giant labyrinth, like, because all labyrinths have a theme, and this one labyrinth is just like, it takes a really long time to get through, and that's like its big issue. And so since Amos is kind of useless in her opinion, she just sticks him in that labyrinth. And so Amos is stuck in this giant labyrinth that takes years and years to complete, and inside of it he meets another kid that was taken by chaos, and she's nice, and they basically grow up together in the labyrinth. It's kind of Hunger Games-y, where like you have to like fight to like survive, eat, and live, and the main goal of it is endurance. And so he lives in there from like the ages of like 7 to 26, I believe, and at the very end of it, he is forced to, him and his friend are forced to kind of fight it out to see who escapes in the end. They kind of reach the very end of the labyrinth, and only one of them can escape and one will die. So they fight, and he wins, and as soon as he is out of the labyrinth, he runs away. Like, he ollies out of the country and goes to America, basically, and he hides himself from chaos with his magic, and then he vows to never touch magic again and never think about any of this. And so he pretends to kind of have a normal life and just never brings it up, and he gets married to a lady named Felicity, and he really likes her, and he's just really happy to like not be living a horrible life anymore, and he's trying really hard to get past it and get over it and never think about it. And he never tells Felicity that he's a wizard. And they have 2 kids together, 2 daughters named Anastasia and Ophelia, or Anna and Ophelia, as they are called usually. And so, yeah, like things are pretty good. He lives for like a couple, I think he lives about like a decade away from all of the terrible stuff. And then I believe we never figured out what happened here. It was probably chaos, but he is killed. Sudden murder, and his wife, well, Felicity, is in complete shock and is mourning, and then he shows up at his funeral as a frickin' ghost, and she is like, oh my god, you lied to me, you were a wizard this whole time. And like, they were having like a normal like tough life sometimes, you know, like where you have to make ends meet, and she's like, you could have just like fixed that, you made me go through all of this. And she's just like, she's in complete shock. She's very upset about like Amos not opening up to her, and like that's a big problem with Amos, is he hides everything and is very closed off. I wonder why he is bad with social stuff. Who knows the source of that? But yeah, she's very upset with him, and like it's coming up around like Christmas time, and so he's trying to like he was like the breadwinner of the family too, so it's like she has to like figure out how she's gonna get a job, because he tries to go back to work, but he's a ghost, and like the ghosts in this world, they can't interact with anything, they just kind of pass through everything. Yeah, so it was really bad for him, and that's when he ends up meeting Amber. Amber is the lady who ends up with Charles. So Amber meets them, and she's like, wow, there is a ghost here. That's crazy. And he's like, yeah, my life is really hard. I don't know what to do. And like, she tries to kind of like life coach him into like talking to his wife about things and like opening the air. I think she ends up helping him because like he is on like a quest, basically. Like, he's gone to like the mall to get her a Christmas present. And like, he's a ghost, so he can lift things up, kind of. Like, if he focuses really, really hard, he can hold on to something as long as he's focused on it. So he has made it to the mall with a credit card, but he can't get through the door because he can't like phase through the door. And she's like, here, let me help you get this thing. So like, she helps him get like the present to his house and hide it in the garden outside because she feels bad for him because he's kind of a mope. Yeah, and in the meantime, there's Jamie, and Jamie is Amber's sister, and Jamie's got issues. Like, Jamie is also dealing with death because like a couple of years ago, I think her girlfriend, her fiance, she died in an accident. They were rock climbing. Like, they did a lot of crazy like sporting stuff, and they were doing like the freeform rock climbing stuff, and she fell and broke her neck. And Jamie's pretty like torn up about that and hasn't been really able to move on. So what happens? I'm a bit confused. Let me figure this out. So what ends up happening is that Jamie is approached by Chaos, and Chaos is like, oh, so you like this girl Felicity, huh? I also have interests in this Felicity for reasons. And she's like, oh, that's cool. And she's like, she's really pretty, right? And she's like, yeah, she's pretty. And she's like, would you like to date Felicity? And she's like, I mean, like, yeah, if I could, I'd totally date Felicity. And Chaos is like, okay, I can make that work. Come Christmas time, I'm pretty sure you will madly fall in love with a girl exactly like Felicity. Don't worry. And I'm sure she'll madly love you too. And she's like, that's cool. And she's like, no, I'm a wizard. It's gonna happen. And she's like, what? And she's like, yeah, you have until Christmas to get me a ghost, this ghost I'm looking for, and then I'll make all your dreams come true. And she's like, oh, but what's the catch? And she's like, there's no catch. I'd prefer you to be able to like get it done by Christmas, but if you can't, well, I guess we'll see if it still works out for you. And Jamie's like super sus about this whole thing, but also like, damn, what if I do get with like this really nice attractive lady? So because she's been having such a hard time with love, so she's like, heck yeah, I guess I accept this deal. So she goes to Felicity and she's like, hey, do you know anything about like a purple ghost? And she's like, oh, my husband is a purple ghost. And like, they start like talking about things, and she's like looking for the purple ghost. However, as things start to get closer and closer to Christmas, Felicity starts to turn into a pig lady. She starts to become like it starts very subtly, and Jamie starts to clue in on this eventually, and as does Felicity. She's like, what's going on? And so Jamie, obviously in shock, goes and finds Chaos, is like, what is going on? What are you doing, you horrible lady? And Chaos is like, oh, you know, like maybe by Christmas, if I get what I want, like things will be fine. So like, don't worry about it. And she's like, heck, I need to go find this purple ghost. Meanwhile, purple ghost Amos is avoiding home because him and his wife have been having more and more troubles because Felicity's like been spending more time with Jamie, and Jamie's been like trying to break Amos and her up so that they're not talking. So Amos has kind of been drifting away and going off and being sad and kind of moping about. And like eventually like Amber finds him floating about, and she's like, what are you doing, Amos? And he's like, I don't know. I messed up. No one wants me. I don't want to be around to ruin her Christmas. I wish I would have just normal died. And he's being a doof, and we all want him to go home, but we also don't want him to go home because we know that like Jamie is gonna go send him off with Chaos, and whatever she plans to do with him is probably terrible. Either way, so like what eventually happens is like Jamie comes at the very last minute. Jamie is like freaking out because she's like, I don't want to fall in love with stupid Felicity if she's gonna be a pig. Like, what? That's gross. I don't condone this. It's all very Midsummer's Night Dream. I love that kind of stuff. Like the freaking, I think it's comeuppance. Either way, so like she's like, I can't do this. This is a bad idea. This is bad mojo. Jamie, please help. Because like Jamie's like her older sister, and she kind of like bails her out of things. And Jamie's like, what the hell are you doing? And then this is where she ends up getting like Charles involved, and they try and help Felicity so that her Christmas is a good Christmas. But it isn't. She ends up being turned into a pig forever, because I don't think we ever fixed poor Felicity. I think we eventually fixed. Eventually, Felicity like almost gets fixed. I think. I don't remember entirely. Either way, Jamie ends up in love with a pig, because she ends up with a girl just like Felicity, like Chaos said. Meanwhile, Chaos gets her hands on freaking Amos anyways, and he goes off with her because he's like, please help my wife. And she's like, lol, too late. I'm gonna just run off with you anyways. And he's like, oh no, well, that's terrible. And like hopefully he can fix Felicity. That's like his dream. Also, Chaos is like, well, obviously you can't raise children if you're a pig, so I'll just go raise them myself. So she runs off with Ophelia and Anna. And so Amos is like, I don't want my kids put in a labyrinth, so please let's make a deal. Freaking Chaos, please. That'd be really nice. Thank you. Yeah, so he goes off, and everyone's very mad at Jamie, and Jamie's like, well, I have a girlfriend now, so like don't even worry about it. And Amber's like, you don't have a girlfriend. And eventually Charles turns like her pig girlfriend into an actual girlfriend, so she's not in love with a pig anymore. Her name is Clover. It's very weird. I don't know what's going on. It's crazy stuff. I'm very sorry. Either way, Amos eventually does come back. I think they rescue him, even though he doesn't really need rescuing, because she can't really do much with a ghost. Eventually Chaos convinces Charles's poor brother into taking the clock out of Amos, and then Amos turns into a labyrinth, and the kids get locked in it. I think they eventually meet up with Amos's kids, because that's what Chaos does to complete this labyrinth. I don't think Chaos actually killed Amos. She might have, because she couldn't control him, and she really needs like his power. Like, the wizards don't have specific powers. Like, they don't have latent abilities, but the whatever labyrinth they do really is like a test of them. It's like you have to be a specific person and think a specific way to get out of this labyrinth. So Amos just has a lot of endurance and what it takes to be basically this time wizard god thing. She needs someone like that in order to stop the real big bad of all of this. Meanwhile, Chaos, she's like her labyrinth, in order for her to defeat it, she had to do some pretty morally reprehensible, self-serving things and just be a little bit off as an individual. So like she isn't like, her name's not actually Chaos, but like that's what they call her. Like some of the wizards just adopt the name of their object. So, like, yeah, she's Chaos. She does a lot of stuff. She does a lot of stuff to poor Ursula's characters, too. She is always up to trouble, doing terrible things, turning people into animals and stuff, and just kind of amusing herself while also working for, like, a greater terrible task. Poor Felicity, poor Amos. I just realized that, like, there's no, like, happy ending for those two, because we never finished it. So poor Felicity is stuck as a pig, and poor Amos is a labyrinth. Oh dear. There's no happy endings in What If Your Boyfriend Was a Dog? There's no happy endings. We never got there. Well, that's a sad note. I think we'll end here. Thank you all for watching. I hope you have a wonderful spoopy holiday, apparently. thank you all for watching. You want to know something else sad? I'm back on DeviantArt. I want you to follow me. Links in the description. This is my only call to action. I want to be a DeviantArt boy. I want you to make me proud. I'm also on Fur Affinity, speaking of other sad fates. Thank you. Thank you all for sticking with me on this very long journey. Love you. Goodbye.